I am Mandy Ronda, and I am a sexual being. Now, thank you for witnessing that. And I would like to invite you to stand up with me. Fuck, yes. So please rise. All of us. And please take a deep breath. That helps me as well. And please repeat after me. Say, I am. I am. Say your full name, please. And I am a sexual being. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, how did that feel? Did that feel natural and comfortable? Or weird and scary? How did it sound? Did it sound truthful and powerful? Was it even audible? What is your relationship with your sexual being? Is it even there? Is it even yours? Or is it there to serve and please others? I was 2 years old when my father cheated on my mother, who was pregnant with my little brother. He left the three of us to live with his new girlfriend, and it left a deep wound within me of feeling unwanted and unloved. We visited him every 2 weeks, but we never felt welcome. Now, fast forward 10 years. Let me take you into his house during one of those weekends when we were visiting them. I told my brother to pack his favorite toys in the guest room where we shared a bed. And I also packed my few belongings. I told my little brother to wait for me in the hallway, and I walked into the living room, where my father and his girlfriend were sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, and drinking their Heineken beers, as they did every day. I said, "Dad, we don't like it here so much anymore. We don't want to visit for a while." He didn't object. Instead, he got angry, called my mother, and said, "Your daughter has offended me." And my little brother and I walked home ourselves. It strengthened the feeling of being unwanted and unloved because he never contacted us again. Little did I know that the name Mandy actually means she who is worthy of love. And that the realization of that would become my life's journey. I was 15 in my final year of secondary school when I went home with a friend. And his adoptive Christian parents had taken in a 27-year-old heroin and cocaine junkie from the streets to take care of her. Danny was his name. One day, he invited me into his small bedroom. And there, things happened that shouldn't have happened. Things against my will. I was caught in his web for 3 months and confused his conditional attention for love from a man. His attention was the first male attention I got, and I traded it for my sexuality. I felt so deeply ashamed. Ashamed for having allowed this to happen. I felt dirty, guilty, and fearful. Fearful of other men, but mostly even fearful of my own body, my own sexuality, and my developing womanhood, which felt vulnerable and object to the male gaze. I felt distrust in my own instinct and intuition, and disgust with my body. And as a result, I disconnected. Disconnected from my body and from my sexuality. I developed an eating disorder, and I started to self-harm my arms and my thighs. All in a desperate yet destructive attempt to reconnect with my body and to regain control and autonomy over my body. So, what is healthy and positive sexuality? Well, the way I see it, it's the most potent form of life energy. It is the force by which we are all created. We're all literally made of it. And it's the force by which we can create new life ourselves as well. It's a source of health and happiness, of passion, playfulness, pleasure, and power. It's a source of connection with your body and the most beautiful, intimate connection we can have with another human being. But mostly, it's the ultimate expression of self-love, because it's about daring to express yourself. And that doesn't just happen in the bedroom. No, your sexuality is an essential part of who you are and how you show up in the world. And feelings of shame, fear, and guilt are the biggest obstacles in living a joyful, pleasurable, and purposeful life. So, shame is a very destructive emotion, but it's also a uniquely human emotion because it indicates self-consciousness. And it's directly linked to prehistoric times when belonging to a tribe was essential to our survival. And shame is the intensely painful feeling of not being good enough, of not being worthy, and of not belonging. Even just seeing or hearing the word shame causes contraction in the body and the urge to hide. Yet, all of us carry sexual shame in some form and to some degree. So let me ask you, where can you sense subtle or less subtle layers of shame? Perhaps around your body, or more specifically around how your genitals look. Perhaps you feel ashamed around your sexual experiences or a lack of them. Shame around your sexual desires, fantasies, fetishes, and kinks. Shame around your sexual performance or problems with your sexual health. Or perhaps you even feel ashamed around something as beautiful as your bodily fluids and sounds of pleasure. So, whereas shame seems to be something really personal, it is also deeply ingrained in our culture. It's even in our language. Did you know, and you probably know, but did you know that in Dutch we even have words for the genitalia that involve the word shame? If I translate them to English, we call the pubic area shame area, pubic hair shame hair, and the female labia shame lips. Now, language is extremely powerful. And our sexuality and sexual vocabulary does not need any shame. We need to move beyond shame. And that starts with language, with voicing our desires, with talking about what we do and don't want, and by inviting others into our shame closets. So, society has so many presumptions, judgments, and double standards around sexuality, which are incredibly harmful to those who don't meet those standards. And even though the acceptance for sexual diversity in our society is slowly growing, we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to our own beliefs around our own sexuality. There's so many ways in which we inhibit the full expression of our sexual being. How do we release shame? How did I release shame? I knew at the age of 12 already that sexual abuse was a pattern in my family system. And when it happened to me 3 years later, I was convinced it would end here and now. I was convinced I would break this pattern. I was not going to struggle with this for a lifetime. I was not going to pass this on to my child or children later on. So when my mom said, history repeats itself, I said no. It would end here and now. So, with the little resources that I had at that age, I tried to find all kinds of ways to process what had happened. And this didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't an easy path, as I already shared with you. I wasn't able to deal with the intensity of my emotions at that age. But ultimately, I learned to give it a voice. I shared my story. I talked about it. breathed into it, danced with it, moved with it, let it move through my body. In any way I could, I explored and expressed my body and my sexuality. I had loads of sex, all kinds of sex, great sex and less great sex. But it all taught me what my sexual being is. I came from having so much shame, fear, and guilt after a traumatic experience as a teenager to being a sexpert, giving lectures and masterclasses in the whole spectrum of sexuality, up until waving dildos on stages. So, if I can go from that place to where I am right now, then it is possible for everyone to move beyond sexual shame. Once people hear I am a sexpert or a sexologist, they often immediately open up and start to share about their shame, insecurities, and desires, sometimes more than I want to know. But I understand, because it can feel so freeing when they know they can finally share their story to someone who won't respond with judgment, who won't think they're weird. It is incredibly freeing to talk about embarrassing things. And shame wears out the more we talk about it, the more we explore what's underneath, and the more we realize that what we are ashamed of is in fact really normal and common, and that we are not the only one. So, whereas shame causes contraction and disconnection, opening up fuels expansion and connection. First and foremost with yourself and with others. And this is the antidote against shame. This is how we unveil shame and strip bare all these layers of subtle and less subtle shame. By exploring and expressing our sexuality, by knowing what we do and don't like, and by daring to talk and ask without expectation, by allowing ourselves to enjoy our sexuality, and by giving ourselves permission to live a shamelessly sexy life. Now, let's have a look together at the word shameless. Because in our culture, it has quite a negative connotation. Even yourself might have once said, "Oh, that girl is so shameless." Whereas shamelessness is not the same as not having any boundaries. Boundlessness is when we do not consider and even cross our own boundaries and those of others. Whereas shamelessness is merely the intrinsic feeling of being utterly and completely okay with who you are and with all that you are. And it's not so much about the final destination of being shameless, it's about the journey of becoming shameless. This beautiful, freeing process of moving beyond shame. So even though it can feel weird and scary, the most beautiful, courageous, and freeing thing we can do for our own sexual being is to shamelessly welcome it. So may I please invite you to stand up again. And please close your eyes. Take a moment for yourself. Let's take a deep breath together. And a sigh or a sound at the end of it. Have a little shake, perhaps. Relax your shoulders. Drop your weight into your pelvic floor. Feel your feet on the ground. And please repeat after me. Say, I am. Say your full name, please. And I am a sexual being. Thank you.